I'm going to talk about stones today, and particularly about moving stones. Joshua chapter 4 and verse 1 through 7. And it came to pass when all the people had completely passed over the Jordan that the Lord spake to Joshua, saying, Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one man from every tribe, and command them, saying, Take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. You shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, Cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you shall take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, What do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer them, that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it crossed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial to the children of Israel forever. And then Joshua 6 and verse 1 through 5. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all of you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. Then you shall do for 6 days. And the 7 priests shall bear the 7 trumpets of the ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpet. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. Now God's people had dealt with stones before. And Joshua, he took Israel across the Jordan into the land God had promised them. And God said, I want every man, one from each tribe, to take a stone and put it on his shoulder and carry it across, and you're going to build a memorial. And these stones are going to come from the middle of the Jordan River. They're not going to come from the banks, but they're going to be stones that people can tell somehow were taken from the Jordan. And this was while the Lord dried it up for them to pass over. And then the next challenge on their agenda was a city protected by a wall of stones. And God had promised them also that you'll be able to take the city. And Joshua was the one that told the Israelites 40 years ago that God was well able to deliver these heathen nations into their hands. And Joshua had faith then that God would help them defeat the giants. But of course, we remember the story that doubt prevailed. And Joshua and Caleb were saying yes when the other 10 spies that spied out the land were full of fear and saying, no, we don't believe that can happen. And so Israel saw this Jordan miracle. They saw the Jordan dry up as the priest stood in the middle of it. Now, even that was a miracle. The Bible doesn't tell us how heavy the ark was. But I did a study, and I asked my father-in-law to help me some years ago, and we just looked at the dimensions of it and how heavy we thought the wood might be. And when they overlaid it with gold, we don't know how thick the gold was, but the gold is what was going to make it very heavy, as much as the wood or more. And we had a conservative number that ark could have weighed 2,000 pounds. And of course, I can't proclaim that as a fact. It's just what we came up with. But 2,000 pounds would mean that each priest that bore the ark had 500 pounds on his shoulder. And not too long ago, I was reading in a commentary about the priest bearing the ark. And in that commentary, it said that ark could have possibly weighed around 2,000 pounds. And I'm certain that they used a different technique to come to their numbers than we did. But it made me feel good that perhaps we were in range. And it doesn't matter really whether it weighed 100 pounds or 500. But my point is, I believe every time the priest picked up the ark, that God helped the priest to bear the ark. And as that tabernacle in the wilderness was taken down and packed away, and the tribe of Levi were there attending to those duties, but it was the priest that would bear the ark. None but the priest should bear the ark. And they bore it on the staves or the poles that went through the rings on the ark with the mercy seat on top, and it was all covered. Nobody saw this. All they saw were the staves that came out and rested on every man's shoulder. And it was quite a journey that they had to go. And they were in the front of the 12 tribes as they would march, and they were following the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire, whether they were marching in the daytime or the nighttime. And then when it stopped, they would stop, and that's where they would set the ark down. And then they would, of course, put together, assemble the tabernacle and the walls around the tabernacle. And so here we're at the end of their journey, and they're getting ready to go in and possess the promised land. And Israel here sees the Jordan River dry up. As the priest walked down into the river, they saw it dry up. But then the Lord said, now you see a dry riverbed. I want you to go down into that riverbed and take stones from there, stones that no one else would ever be able to have access to. And you're going to take stones from the river. Now, stones in a river look a lot different than stones sitting on the side of a craggy mountain. They're smooth. The water over the course of centuries has smoothed these stones out. And they took them out. And I'm sure at the edge of the river, you could see a stone sticking up all up and down the river. So when they saw these massive stones on the other side, stacked as a memorial, it was easy for them in the generations to come to tell their children, I want you to see these stones. These stones represent the miracle of crossing over dry ground as God stopped the waters of the Jordan for us to pass over. And therefore, future generations would know what God had done. That miracle also caused fear in the land because the people had to see, how are they going to get across the Jordan? And suddenly, not only did they cross the Jordan, but they have a monument set up that proves that God stopped the waters of the Jordan. And the city of Jericho, they locked their doors and their windows for fear because these Israelites, nothing could stop them because their God was mighty. Now Joshua listened to God and received instructions on how to do even more things. Because if God can move a stone that one man can pick up, God can move stones that no man can pick up. And so what we can't do, God takes over and does the rest. And Israel's obedience and simply walking around this walled city for 6 days is a great lesson to us. And on that seventh day, God said, that's the day that you're gonna have victory. So 6 days they would march around and go back and get in their tents. And silently, he said, don't utter a word, just go and march and go back to your tents. And I can imagine the fear of the city as they looked out of their walls, of their windows on that wall, and they would see these strange people just marching. And then they would just go back, and perhaps they're thinking, what are they doing? What's supposed to transpire here? But, all God said, get out of your tents, walk to Jericho, march around it, and come back. And then on that seventh day, he said, march around it 7 times. And when you've gone around it the 7th time, just let the trumpets blow and everybody shout. And of course, one of the most common stories in the Bible, the walls fell down flat. But the instructions were simple, just march and obey, and God takes care of the rest. But now in the middle of the Jordan, each man, each head of each tribe picked up 1 stone because they could move those stones. But God stopped the water so they could have access to the stones. But when the stones are so big that no man can pick them up, God still has a plan. And that plan was just march around it and trust me. And God moved those giant walls of Jericho and pushed them down, and the walls fell flat. So God can move small stones. He can move large rocks. And what we can do, we do. But what we can't do, God does the rest. And sometimes, those little things that he asks us to do, just march around it, just obey, just pray every day. Those are our installment payments. And we make one payment at a time as we walk by faith and not by sight. and God does the rest. And sometimes we walk next to someone whose attitude may be helping our doubt. And a good attitude can invade a bad attitude and give you hope where you didn't have hope. Mark chapter 16, verse 1 through 4, it says, when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome had brought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun, and they said among themselves, who shall roll away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. And again, they came there. They came there to see that body. But the Lord rolled the stone away. These ladies weren't going to be able to roll a stone away. So they had settled for just showing honor and respect, to the tomb, but knew that there was a large stone in the way. And if they had, recently read the book of Joshua that morning, they might have thought, we believe God's going to take care of this. The large stone had been rolled away for them to see the true miracle. And God will move those things out of your way that are obstacles. He will move things for you to see his glory and things that reward your patience and keep you moving forward. But the main point, the rock removal is not the main event. It just clears the way for God's glory. And a move of God in a worship service is awesome, but it's not the main event. It's just the opening of the miracle. It's the opening of the door. It's getting us ready for what God could do in our private world. The worship we have publicly is great, but that's preparation to give us faith to walk out the doors, because our faith is soaring when we're in a worship service. But God needs us to hold on and trust him for some other things. And so what we feel when we're together, that feeling of his presence, that feeling of unity, we need to hang on to that and then walk into our private world and say, wait, I remember my God. He was there and I felt that. And let that build your faith. Because we all have our own rocks to bear. We have our own rocks that we need to move. We have our rocks that we need for our memorials. And truly, one becomes a memorial, then another becomes a memorial, and we build our own altars to the glory of God. We all have our rocks. One woman had been sick 12 years, while a 12-year-old girl had just died. Think about this. I mentioned this a few weeks ago, that Jesus is on his way to heal a girl that had died. Now she's dead, and she's 12 years old. And while he's going, a woman touches the hem of his garment that had been sick for 12 years. Both of those, he rolled the stones away. He moved those burdens out of the way. One woman caught in adultery. Another had 5 husbands. But Jesus brought hope to both of them. Things they thought were insurmountable. And in their world, those were large stones. They thought, how in the world can we get past this? And see, we all do this right here. We look at the Bible and say, well, how foolish were they? They should have believed. But our story can fit in those pages too. We limit God because we see that we had a hand in our failures. Part of it, we are to blame for part of the trouble that we get into. And we see that and think, but I'm beset by guilt if I wouldn't have done this, or had I listened to this or that. And we need to let God into our situations because he moves stones. He can roll the burdens away. One man had been paralyzed 38 years. 38 years. And the Lord said, get up and walk. The small stones that are in your path, the little obstacles, we can move those. And God can give you strength to bear the load, for the next mile or two. But each victory is a progressive step from one stone to another as you cross into new territory. And, it might be that you've been staring at an obstacle. You've been staring at that stone, for a very long time. And it may be something that God has allowed in your life to draw you up to the negotiating table to say, all right, Lord, I'm ready to talk. Now, here's another scenario. You may know somebody, a coworker, a family, a friend, that they've been bearing something for a long time. And maybe this devotion today can give you the impetus to go to them and say, hey, I want to encourage you that our God is able to help you bear this load. And if you'll take just a step, if you'll pick up what you can, God will pick up what you can't. And I believe God can do that right now. God bless y'all.